Welcome to Exposing Deathcare, a podcast created to shine a light on the hidden, often dark realities within the funeral industry. I'm your host, Em, and each episode we bring you real stories from those who have experienced the best and worst of this hidden world. This podcast is a platform to expose unethical practices, harmful experiences, and shady dealings that have plagued grieving families, funeral staff, and the industry as a whole. By bringing these stories to light, Exposing Deathcare aims to push for transparency, support those affected by trauma, and encourage necessary reforms in the way deathcare operates. By bringing these stories to light, Exposing Deathcare aims to push for transparency, support those affected by trauma, and encourage necessary reforms in the way deathcare operates. From documentaries to dramatizations, what's fact, what's fiction, and what are they still not telling you? Listener discretion is advised. The stories shared in this podcast at times may be anonymous to protect the individuals involved. Thank you for listening, and we hope that by sharing these stories, we can work together to improve the deathcare industry for everyone involved. Hello. It's me, your guest, your host, your friend, the modern mortician. Welcome back to another episode of Exposing Deathcare. This episode, we're going to talk about something I've been seeing more and more of in the spaces where the funeral professionals are gathering behind closed doors. Online forums, group chats, my private DMs. It's something we have to talk about. So I'm going to start with a post that recently made the rounds online. It's from a funeral director who finally decided to walk away from the industry. I guess this title for this episode is going to be Why They're Leaving. Here's what they wrote. After almost 6 years in the industry, doing removals briefly, taking a career break, working with a couple different funeral homes in the area, I finally decided I had enough. I recently accepted a position with good pay and commutable distance. But even with all its perks, short commute, better working environment, it still doesn't soften the blow. I've tried moving around the industry, given it multiple chances, tried sticking it out, but I think I've finally had enough. Since I'm fresh into this position, I'm taking action now to pivot to HR before I crash out. Just thinking about going into the office tomorrow makes me sick. I've even debated telling my managers that I simply don't have it in my heart anymore so that they can start looking for a new director and stop planning for me to be in it long term. It truly makes me feel guilty, but I have to put my foot down before it gets worse. So that post hit a nerve, not just because of what they said, but because of how many people in the comments were responding same, or I've felt this too, or I'm afraid to say it publicly. So this episode doesn't center around that one post, but more the culture in death care that scares people into not talking about it. And I've seen it myself. I've felt it. Over the years, I've had funeral directors, apprentices, embalmers, even office staff message me. They say things like, I wish I could share my story, but I'd lose my job. Or they burnt me out. And when I spoke out, I was iced out. Or one of the most impactful ones. I watched what they did to you, and it scared the hell out of me. Again, I've gotten so many DMs from people in this field, like quiet messages, anonymous accounts, people who follow me, like not just for content, but they say it for courage. They saw I was willing to speak up and they wanted to know, is it safe to tell? Is it safe to tell my story? Hit or miss. It depends on what kind of position you're in. One of those people was a woman that worked at a Texas funeral home. She followed me on Instagram and eventually sent me a message. She was scared. Got a couple of colleagues. We're going through some things with her. She'd witnessed and experienced firsthand harassment by the owner of the funeral home, family-owned firm. So who do you go to? She said, I don't know who to tell. I don't think anybody's going to believe me. And after numerous attempts for them to address this in-house, after she and the other employees lost their job, I encouraged her to speak up and speak out. What she described was unfortunately not uncommon. The funeral home that she worked at was Charles W. Smith & Sons in Saxe, Texas. A news article reads, According to the EEOC suit, the defendant's owner and funeral director subjected 4 female employees to a hostile work environment both at the company's Saxe Mortuary and the McKinney Funeral Home. He, the owner of the funeral home, he made numerous crude sexual comments and sexual propositions to the women and subjected them to unwelcome physical touching. He also offered money for sexual acts. Even after the sexual harassment was reported to other supervisors and managers, no responsive or remedial actions were taken. Instead, one of the female employees was removed from the work schedule following her report of sexual harassment, and the other 3 were forced to resign, the agency charged. Such alleged conduct violates Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits discrimination based on sex, including sexual harassment and retaliation for complaining about it. So the EEOC filed suit. 3-year consent decree settling the suit was entered by U.S. District Judge Amos Mazant on October 19th, 2022. 3 years, it's coming up here in 25. It prohibits future discrimination and retaliation. In addition to the payment of damages to the female employees, the decree requires the mortuary and funeral home provide annual training to all employees, including specified trainer for the owner, on eliminating discrimination in the workplace and the rights and responsibilities of employees. The training will also discuss the appropriate steps to be taken in response to complaints about sexual harassment. The defendants will also have to hire a professional human resources monitor to whom employees can report sexual harassment and who will ensure compliance with the decree. Supervisors at both the funeral homes and the mortuary repeatedly said there was nothing that they could do to respond to the demands for sexual favors and unwanted advances these women faced because they came from the owner, said Alex Lang, trial attorney in the EEOC's Dallas District Office. Probably didn't say it like that. I did. Lawyers have a legal responsibility to ensure a safe workplace and not punish women who come forward to report abuse. The EEOC supervisory trial attorney Suzanne Anderson adds, a funeral home's business is founded upon trust. This owner violated the trust of his employees by creating a hostile work environment. The EEOC stands ready to come to the defense of sexual harassment victims. So let me read the official statement from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC, because this one actually made it to and through court. Charles W. Smith Funeral Homes, Inc., which operates funeral homes in the Dallas area, violated federal law by subjecting 3 female workers to sex harassment and punishing them for complaining about it, the EEOC said. And instead of helping, the managers allegedly told the women to just avoid being alone with him. That was their solution. Stay out of his way. Let that sink in. Not only was the owner using his power to harass the employees, but when the women came forward, they were punished, and it wasn't hidden. So the federal government took it seriously enough to sue him in federal court, and the good news is they won. So according to that 22 settlement, Charles W. Smith and Sons Funeral Home and Metro Mortuary and Crematory were forced to pay $135,000 in damages and enter into that 3-year consent decree that is apparently ending October 2025 this year. They're required to provide the annual anti-harassment training to all the employees. The owner himself must undergo special training, and a third-party HR monitor will oversee complaints because clearly no one in-house was doing anything to protect these women. And this happens in family-run firms because there is no HR. So the initial woman that spoke out found it hard to find employment for years after the case settled, and she ended up leaving the industry recently after moving out of state. The others that were involved that stayed quiet out of fear, you're not weak. You're doing what you needed to do to survive in a system that failed you. All the women that came before the ones that spoke up, you did what you needed to do to survive in a system that failed you. And we're sorry. Gatekeeping is another alarming trend for those entering the field. Here's a story from my inbox about gatekeeping. Like many not currently working in the industry, but still holding her mortuary license, like so many others, she reached out because she didn't know where else she could say this out loud. So the story captures something I've been hearing over and over again and actually have experienced since the beginning of my funeral career. Initially, it was targeted at women. Now it seems to just be targeted at anyone. Gatekeeping. And it's not just from the owner of it or executives, but from your colleagues. The kind of toxic hierarchy that keeps passionate licensed professionals from growing, not because they aren't capable, but because someone else is afraid to share space. So I'm going to read her word. Hi there. I saw that your podcast is about exposing the dark and unfortunate sides of the funeral industry, such as grieving families being preyed upon and toxic environments for employees. Although I'm not currently employed in the industry, I do have a mortuary license, which I received in 2020. Unfortunately, I'm still rusty in certain parts of the job due to gatekeeping and stubborn and selfish behavior by those who were able to help me. Here's my story. I completed my funeral director internship and received my full funeral director license in 2023. I stayed with the funeral home where I completed my internship, but unfortunately, I was laid off this past December. Despite having received my license, I'm still rusty in certain parts of the industry, including embalming and prep work, which is what I'm most drawn to. For starters, more people are selecting cremation, so obviously that impacts the amount of repetition and experience needed for improved skill and confidence. Also, my former workplace had one employee who did a majority of the embalmings, and she was unable to serve as a preceptor due to upper management rules and other regulations, so my practice was very limited. Oddly enough, after more time went by, the same employee was able to have students and newer interns embalm with her. She never had any qualms about those students and newer interns practicing with her. But when I asked if she'd help give me more practice, she'd reply, I prefer to embalm alone. The manager was aware of this, and so was his manager, along with other colleagues, but no matter what the manager or anyone else did or said, nothing changed. One day, I even received an email from another colleague telling me that I was making a difference for the team and I should be thankful to have my license, and that no one wanted to hear me talking or asking about supervised embalmings or directings again. The manager also got this email, and he was disappointed with the team. Alas, nothing changed. So here I am now, not currently employed in the funeral industry through no fault of my own, still passionate about this career field, but in need of more supervised practice with embalmings and directings. Can't help but have a feeling that this is why I was selected to be laid off. Thanks to certain former co-workers not wanting to give me more practice and guidance, especially that main embalmer who always told me I prefer to embalm alone, yet never ever having qualms about newer students and new interns embalming with her. I hope she's happy. I recently received a comment that gatekeeping is a common problem in the funeral industry, which is exactly what I experienced and why I'm not as proficient as I should and want to be. So yeah, there's my story and situation. The funeral industry is one of those fields where you cannot get enough training and are always learning something, and embalming in particular takes a lot of repetition. Unfortunately, not everyone comprehends this. I want to take a moment to speak directly to the person that wrote this to me. You are not alone. What happened to you is real. It's part of a pattern in this field that too many of us have witnessed. Can't even talk. Happened to you is real. Part of a pattern in this field too many of us have witnessed. The idea that someone can say, I prefer to embalm alone while training others right in front of you. That's not preference. That's power hoarding. That's gatekeeping. And it is quite literally costing this profession good people. Washington has a weird ass law where apprentices, mortuary students, can act as funeral directors without licenses. They just have to be like overseen by a funeral director. And what I saw was these apprentices and students being hired at apprentice and student wages and doing the job of an actual funeral director with minimal oversight and still being confused. So, depending on the state you're in, you may be working with a student that may or may not have supervision. Those of you that have been made to feel like you don't belong in this work because of jealousy, insecurity, or pure selfishness, hear me. You do belong. You deserve mentorship, growth, and respect. And I'm sorry it's so hard to get that. If you've experienced gatekeeping or retaliation or been stonewalled in your learning, this podcast is your space too. Send me your story, anonymously or otherwise, because exposing death care isn't just about revealing corporate greed or family owned funeral home shenanigans. It's also about calling out the quiet sabotage that happens in the prep room behind the closed doors and under the guise of that's just how it is. We're not doing that anymore. So, again, let me say this clearly. If you're experiencing burnout, harassment, retaliation, or just a deep quiet knowing that something isn't right, you're not alone and you're not crazy. One of the saddest things I've seen is how often the people who enter this work with the most compassion are the ones that get chewed up the fastest. The ones who want to advocate for families, improve transparency, or make things more humane are the ones labeled too sensitive, unprofessional, or a problem. And we're expected to just take it, stay silent, don't rock the boat. That's what I was told to do. Obviously, when I started doing Exposing Deathcare, the podcast, I knew I was opening myself up to more criticism. But I also knew that silence was just costing everybody more. So, been telling the stories myself and others for years, calling out industry abuse, misinformation, exploitation. Th- I've lived it. I just don't talk about it. There's been times where I've had explosive posts in the past on my Instagram that I've had to go back and delete, despite them having a valid story and a valuable lesson in them, because I was speaking my truth and trying to work in the industry that I was speaking out against. I had to hide a lot of what I had come forward with in the past. Most recently, something that I'm learning to talk about has been the most difficult. It's the real gotcha moment. It's when they got me. In early 2022, I accepted a position with a small, independently owned funeral home in a rural community. Like, within an hour radius of the place, they owned, like, 1, 2, 3, 4 funeral homes, maybe 5. I was transparent with them before hiring. I was involved. "Hey, I'm involved in this documentary. I do social media," etcetera, so forth. The offer included of solid hourly pay, supposedly every other weekend off, no PTO, no health insurance, no written contract, just an email. After moving to this area, starting working there on day 1, something felt off. What I encountered in the months to follow that was far beyond what I was prepared for, even after 20 years in death care. I witnessed violations of the Washington Administrative Code, state RCWs, and federal funeral rule regulations, some of which directly endangered public health and exploited grieving families. During my time of being employed there, I had already begun gearing up in my head. This wouldn't be a long term thing, and maybe I would just open a competing business someday. Started taking notes, bodies that were stored without refrigeration at certain locations, one in particular, over a week in the summer. Cremations that were carried out by unlicensed and untrained individuals, whatever family happened to be living in the area working for them at the time. Death certificates or cremations, well, death certificates were routinely delayed, in some cases not filed at all, but cremations would sometimes move forward without permits just to get them out of the cooler. Families were being charged for services they didn't actually receive. There were several instances that I was instructed to move cremations forward without authorization forms, with no next of kin confirmed, just so we could make room in the cooler. I was told not to contact families if it would slow down the process. At one point, I was instructed to go ahead and cremate someone whose paperwork wasn't in yet because the body was taking up too much space. I reported everything I saw after I was wrongfully terminated. I did raise concerns internally and tried to offer solutions, and when nothing changed, I just kept documentation. And as soon as I turned it in, that was the moment the retaliation began. So, first, I was fired without cause. I was on a scheduled day off and texted that my employment had ended. When I went to retrieve my belongings, they had already been packed by someone else. I wasn't allowed to gather my things. I had to give them a list after that of what was missing. Then came the harassment. Over the next year, I was subject to a relentless smear campaign by this employer, who then teamed up with other entities in the industry that I rubbed the wrong way. Anonymous complaints were filed against my professional license. Defamatory claims circulated through funeral director forums. People that I once called friends filed legal orders against me, claiming that I was dangerous, unstable, and a threat to their business. Surprisingly, it wasn't the funeral home guy. I was followed. I was filmed. I was verbally attacked in public. These things were witnessed by other people. I received anonymous threats even. Even after I tried to walk away, I was pulled back in and accused of crimes I didn't commit. So eventually, I found myself in court. My former employer claimed I'd made unauthorized purchases during my employment. Purchases that were approved, that I had receipts for. Purchases made on a shared company card for office and funeral supplies. I thought I would have a chance to explain. The initial court summoning accused me of something completely different. I thought that my court-appointed attorney would look at the evidence and that, we'd get to all talk about it. That's not what happened. I was never arrested. I was never questioned in any formal way. I was just summoned. And once inside the courtroom, I was appointed a public defender who barely spoke to me. We had no one-on-one time outside the courthouse, ever. So initially, what got me there was accusations of theft of a casket by misdelivery. So when word spread that the company had provided a letter stating this was false, that casket was meant for Melissa, and our driver drove to the funeral home before looking at the paperwork to see it was a different address he was to be at. They flopped the charges to 14 charges of identity theft for each time the company card was used on Amazon purchases during my employment, which was under 6 months there. And 3 mistakes made after my employment due to the card being saved to my Amazon shopper profile. I was ready to take ownership of the 3 mistakes and was very upfront with my court-appointed attorney. 2 of the mistakes had actually been returned to Amazon when the error had been discovered on my end. The one that hadn't was a piece for my car that couldn't be. I actually had a conversation with my landlord, like, what do I do? Do I send him a money order saying this happened and it was a mistake? We were waiting for court to tell me what to do because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. So the next 8 months, I was dragged through every other week, having to show up for court an hour away for constant continuations by this subpar appointed legal representative. And in the end, I was coerced into signing a plea deal, dropping from 14 to 1 felony ID theft that I never committed, while crying and repeatedly saying, "This is not what happened. This deal was presented to me in the back room of a courthouse with no support." At this point, I was terrified, I was exhausted, and I just wanted it all to be over. That moment literally changed everything. I lost the ability to bring in income. Not even DoorDash would have me at that point. I closed my nonprofit that I was trying to start. My professional reputation was completely under attack and under the microscope online. So I isolated myself. I didn't know what else to do. I was looking for help. I was looking for therapy. Everything in the area I was in was full. I was overwhelmed by fear, shame. My mental health collapsed. And then the posts from the colleagues began. Accusations and stories just piling on. No fact checking. Nobody speaking up. People that were in my corner had no idea that this was going on to even defend me in my inability to defend myself. I still have a screenshot from Facebook where a certain Micah Truman, this is a CEO of a big ass company called Return Home that does composting, which I've spoken out against their practices, like questioning them. Not saying that they're doing anything wrong, just questioning some things. He, on his personal profile, posted on Facebook in a forum for a community that I was accused of completely different, unspeakable things, which go figure were false. I'm still wondering what recourse I have for that other than to continue to make people aware that this individual is that kind of individual. In August 2023, I was hospitalized for the first time, like mental hospitalization. Not because I was a danger to others, but because I felt like I had nothing left. While I was trying to heal, more harassment orders were piled on me. People I hadn't contacted in months and had no desire to be around or connected to were showing up in court to shut me up. There's 3 individuals in particular that annually they filed to extend these orders, and the judge granting these requests, coincidentally, is a weekly client of the worst offender. A small town shenanigan bullshit. So I stopped fighting. I just let them have those battles. If they do it again this year, I'm not even going. Let them have it. I don't want to have anything to do with them. The reason they're continuing to file this is because they don't want me to speak out about what happened. And that's still something I haven't talked about. So I just let people win the battles for a while. I didn't have the strength. All I wanted was peace. All I wanted was to not want to die. And on the bright side, I only had time for some self-care. All those times that I'd tried to make doctor's appointments to go therapy or, go get my antidepressants altered, different things like that, where my employers wouldn't give you weekday time off. Like what doctors are open on the weekends? Give me that. Like what therapist is going to work with you on the weekends? I mean, especially during the year 2020 and on, like they were all booked. Oh, but now I do have time for that self-care. I was eventually diagnosed with PTSD and CPTSD, among some other things I'm not ready to delve into on this podcast, but all a direct result of the harassment and pressure put on me by those people in positions of power. I now see a psychiatrist monthly, and I talk to a therapist weekly. I walk my dog, disassociate a lot. I make to-do lists. I listen to birds. I try to figure out what my next move is to make me happy. And I try every day to remember who I am outside of what they said I was. I have an entire binder, 1-inch binder printed of the stuff that was being said about me. Maybe someday I'll address it in a book. Maybe someday I'll just start reading it on TikTok for the giggles. Because a lot of these people went back and did dirty deletes, but not before I captured an imprint. I never stole from anyone. I never threatened anyone's life. I simply tried to bring transparency to a system that is built on silence. And when I reported the truth, they tried to destroy me. Hey, they didn't. I'm still here. I'm still speaking. Because for every one of me, there are a dozen others. Funeral professionals who loved the work, that believed in the mission, and got burned by a system that prioritizes money and control over care and truth. Another post in a funeral forum on the internet I was moved to share. It reads, I moved to a new town recently after some legal fallout with a former employer who fucked me and others, the community, over, whom I originally trusted. And ever since I've gotten here, I can't find work. I'm dual licensed and even have my crematory certificate, but everyone in my city, now mind you, I live in a pretty big metro area, just isn't hiring. Well, hiring me at least. I've tried transfer specialist roles, embalmer openings, crematory operator openings, and sometimes I'll get to the interview process and feel like I have the cat in the bag and then just not get a call back. And I'll call an email to follow up myself and never hear back. Are places this petty and immature that they can't even give you the courtesy email of sorry, no longer available? It's extremely discouraging. I'm a perfectionist at my job. I have never made a vital mistake in my career. All by my limited experience, I'm like 8 years in experience wise. I know mistakes can be inevitable. I'm relatively young and I'm not some drama seeking, volatile employee. In fact, I'm the very opposite of it. I mind my business. I stay in my lane. I get my work done to the highest degree of quality possible. Take my work super seriously and have never mistagged anyone or forgot to put a bracelet on them ever. It makes me so discouraged to see care centers and places hiring morons who treat it just as any other job and not as a duty they should be proud of. And they seem to keep them around and promote this cattle brained behavior too. Not saying I'm too smart. I just feel like I fall in a certain part of the graph where it's like I tried too hard. And as a result, I'm under extra scrutiny compared to a simple Billy over there that can't even remember to load the cot in head first. It's so discouraging. I'm strongly considering just bouncing, despite all the effort school wise I put into this. But this move into a new city and stuff has kind of shown me that I don't think others in the industry have each other's backs. It's all kill or be killed when it doesn't have to be. I knew people I broke my back for, people I worked for. Here I am today with nothing to show for it. I'm on unemployment and strongly considering getting a $17 an hour EMS job just to cleanse my palate from this favoritism shit. Sincerely, someone who tried giving a shit in the funeral industry. Someone responded to them and saying, it's a shame you cannot discuss what happened, why, or how your former employer screwed you in the community. There are situations the public needs to know in order to understand funeral service workers and what we do. It's online, but to protect the person that posted this, I'm not going to connect that story. Another individual said, not in the death care profession, so take this for whatever you think it's worth from an industry outsider, but I am a 2-time whistleblower in 2 different fields. When you blow a whistle, you lose your job and you probably lose your career in that entire field forever. I'm sorry, that's how it is, but it is that way. If you reported something illegal or unethical, even if the powers that be thanked you for your integrity, they will not see to it that you are not punished for failing to be a team player. Despite the time, effort, and money you have invested in building a career in a very specific field, I think you probably need to move on and start over in something else. The world has become too small for relocating to another town to count as moving on and starting over. You need a new profession. I wish I did not feel I had to say that. I know it's disheartening, but it is probably better to cut your losses by facing a career change sooner rather than later. The original poster responds, this is the sad, likely truth of the matter. Evil people are afraid of truth sayers, and that was simply all I did. I pulled back a veil on something that was hurting people. And as they said earlier, this move to a new city has kind of shown me that I don't think others in the industry have each other's backs. It's all kill or be killed. Oh, they are not wrong. I want to say this loud and clear for anyone listening who feels the same way. You are not alone. Too many skilled ethical workers in funeral service have been pushed out for doing the right things. Whether that's reporting unlicensed practice, calling out unsafe conditions, or not playing the political game. One comment nailed it. When you blow a whistle, you probably lose your career in that entire field forever. That's how I felt for a little bit. But I have too much knowledge and too much experience to just disappear. So here I am. But that is the quiet cost of conscious in death care. Consciousness, having a conscience, the quiet cost of having a conscience. We tell families we honor their loved ones, that we're a calling, not just a job. But behind the scenes, often it's a tight lipped loyalty over integrity system in just too many markets. to the person that posted that online. Thank you for your honesty. Thank you for still wanting to do this work with care, even when the system hasn't cared for you. If I were in a position, I would want to hire a person like you. Oh, to those listenings that have made mistakes but still show up with humility, thank you too. But if you're the one still promoting a Billy because he's easy to control and pushing out the perfectionists because they make you feel insecure, you are a part of the problem. The funeral industry doesn't need more showrooms and fancier hearses. It needs more people with backbone. And if you're someone out there hiring, maybe stop ignoring the resume of the one that fought for dignity when nobody else would. Yeah, it does feel bad. It should. But we can make it better by speaking up, connecting with each other, and remembering that no one should be punished for giving a hoot. So, again, if you've been through something similar, whether it's gatekeeping, burnout, harassment, legal retaliation, professional sabotage, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not alone. You are not crazy, and you are not the problem. This profession doesn't always protect the right people, but this space, this podcast, the modern mortician, will. Because we're not going to fix this industry by pretending. We're going to fix it with the truth, even when it costs me. If you're listening and you got a story to tell, maybe it's still too fresh, too risky, too painful to say out loud. That's okay. Your experience is valid. Whether you're in the industry now, left it behind, or in between, I see you. I believe you. I'm making a space for you. You can always reach out anonymously, DM me on Instagram, email me, submit a story for the podcast. You don't have to go public or be a part of the movement. You just deserve to be heard because we're not going to fix anything with silence. In the history of all time, we've never fixed anything with silence. We fix it with truth. And I'll end it with this. If you're feeling like this job has broken you and like you've had to carry death and trauma alone, you don't have to carry it quietly. Whether you speak up or not, your experience matters. It always has. Reach out to a therapist. Reach out to a professional you trust. Because if you need to speak it, you need to get it off your heart. Thank you for listening to this episode of Exposing Deathcare, the podcast. I truly appreciate your support and the courage of those who have contributed to or shared their stories with us. If you or someone you know has something to share, we encourage you to reach out. You can remain anonymous, and your story could prevent future harm. You can leave comments, ask questions, or provide feedback by connecting with us on social media at Exposing Deathcare on TikTok and Instagram, The Modern Mortician on YouTube, and all streaming platforms. Like, follow, and share. Podcast music titled Exit Strategy by Enlia.